I'm Alara, 34 female. I live in a quiet one-bedroom apartment that I've curated to be my sanctuary, a calm space in a busy world. As a senior data analyst for a major tech firm, my days are governed by logic, patterns, and the pursuit of objective truth, and I've built a life that reflects that: stable, predictable, and financially secure. That security, however, felt less like a personal achievement and more like a communal resource for my family. For years, I was the reliable one, the emergency contact, the financial backstop. And for years, I believed I was helping my mother stay afloat. It wasn't until a single, thoughtless click on a social media app that I realized I wasn't funding her survival. I was funding my sister's lavish lifestyle, all orchestrated by the one person I was programmed to trust unconditionally. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The phone call always came at the end of the month, a predictable spike in my data set of family communications. My mother, Brenda, had a knack for timing, catching me just as my paycheck cleared, a digital predator sensing a fresh deposit in the bank. This time, the call came on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting at my small dining table, mapping out a budget for a potential vacation to the coast, my first real holiday in 3 years. The screen lit up with her photo, a soft focus image from a decade ago, and my stomach tightened in a familiar knot of dread and obligation. "Hi, Mom," I answered, trying to keep my voice light, as if I hadn't already guessed the purpose of the call. "Elara, sweetie, am I catching you at a bad time?" Her voice was a practiced blend of frailty and anxiety, a tone she had perfected over the years. "No, it's fine. I just got home from work. Everything okay?" It was a pointless question. Everything was never okay. "Oh, I don't know," she began with a heavy sigh that crackled through the speaker. "It's just one thing after another. You know the old furnace in the basement? It's been making this awful clanking noise all week. I had a man come out to look at it today, and he said the heat exchanger is cracked." "A cracked heat exchanger, Alara." "He said it's a miracle it hasn't been leaking carbon monoxide into the house." I closed my eyes, the images of a sun-drenched coastline on my laptop screen seeming to mock me. A cracked heat exchanger. Last month, it was a plumbing leak that had supposedly flooded the crawl space. The month before that, it was an emergency dental crown. The emergencies were always just plausible enough to be believable and just expensive enough to be a serious problem for someone on a fixed retirement income. "Okay," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "What's the estimate? How much to fix it?" "Well, that's the thing, honey. He said it's too old to fix. The whole unit needs to be replaced." She paused for dramatic effect. I could practically hear her wringing her hands. "He quoted me nearly $5,000. I just don't know what I'm going to do. My little pension barely covers the property taxes and groceries. I was thinking I could just wear more sweaters, but he made it sound so dangerous." $5,000. My vacation fund, which I had been so meticulously nurturing for 6 months, was exactly $5,200. It felt like she had a direct view into my bank account. I imagined the spreadsheet on my screen morphing, the column labeled "Trip to Monterey" being overwritten in bold red letters with "Mom's Furnace." "I don't have that kind of money just sitting around, Mom," I lied, a weak attempt at self-preservation. "Oh, I know, sweetie, I know. You work so hard," she cooed, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. "I wouldn't even ask, but I'm just so scared. And your sister, Chloe, you know she's still trying to get on her feet. She doesn't have a penny to spare." Chloe, my younger sister, a 26-year-old aspiring influencer, whose primary occupation seemed to be taking artistic photos of her lattes. The idea of asking Chloe for money was laughable. She still lived at home, rent-free, a permanent resident in the nest I had flown years ago. According to Mom, Chloe was a delicate artist, a sensitive soul who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of the world, like paying bills. I, on the other hand, was the capable one. It was a compliment that had started to feel like a life sentence. Guilt is a powerful motivator, and my mother was an expert at wielding it. She painted a picture of herself as a shivering, impoverished widow in a dangerous house, and I was her only hope. The responsible daughter. The good daughter. The argument I had with myself was always the same. What if it was true this time? Could I live with myself if something happened to her because I was selfishly saving for a vacation? The answer was always no. "Let me see what I can do, Mom," I said, the words tasting like defeat. "I can probably move some things around. I can send you half now and the other half in 2 weeks." The relief in her voice was immediate and transformative. The frail, worried woman disappeared, replaced by someone bright and effusive. "Oh, Alara, thank you. You're my savior, you really are. I knew I could count on you. You've always been so good to your old mom." We exchanged a few more pleasantries. She asked about my work in the vaguest terms possible, I asked about her health, and then we hung up. I was left in the silence of my apartment, the glow of my laptop illuminating my face. I transferred $2,500 from my savings to my checking account and then wired it to her. The confirmation screen felt like a tombstone for my dreams of ocean breezes and sea otter sightings. I spent the rest of the evening in a state of quiet resentment. It wasn't just the money. It was the crushing weight of the responsibility, the gnawing feeling that my life was not entirely my own. I was the engine, and my mother and sister were the caboose, and the train was only ever going in one direction. I ate a sad, simple dinner of toast and eggs, the meal of someone who suddenly felt poor. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Family helps family. It was a mantra I had repeated to myself for years, a flimsy shield against the feeling that I was being systematically dismantled, one wire transfer at a time. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the image of my sister, Chloe. I wondered what she was doing at that exact moment, blissfully unaware that her warm, safe house was being paid for by my canceled vacation. The thought was bitter, and it kept me awake long after the city outside had gone quiet. The 2 days following the wire transfer were a blur of work and manufactured frugality. I packed my lunch, skipped my morning coffee purchase, and mentally calculated every dollar, as if punishing myself for the financial hit. The resentment simmered just below the surface, a low-grade fever of frustration. I tried to push it down, telling myself I had done my duty. My mother was safe, her house was no longer a death trap, and that was what mattered. I had chosen responsibility over selfishness, a choice that was supposed to make me feel virtuous. Instead, I just felt hollowed out. It happened on Thursday night. I was decompressing after a particularly grueling day of debugging a flawed data model, my mind a tangle of code and statistics. I was scrolling aimlessly through my phone, a mindless ritual to disconnect my brain from the day's stresses. My social media usage was minimal. I mostly used it to keep up with a few old college friends and follow news outlets. My sister, Chloe, however, treated her social media profile as a full-time job. Her public account was a meticulously curated gallery of her perfect life. I rarely looked at it, seeing her endless stream of brunches, boutique shopping sprees, and sun-drenched candid. Shots usually left me with a sour taste in my mouth. It was like watching a highlight reel of a life completely devoid of consequence. But that night, for a reason I still can't explain, a morbid curiosity, a flicker of suspicion, perhaps, I typed her name into the search bar. Her latest post was from the previous day, Wednesday, the day after I had sent the first half of the furnace money. The photo was professionally lit, sharp and vibrant. Chloe was posing in front of a mirror in her bedroom, a room I hadn't seen in years but recognized instantly. She was holding up a new handbag. It wasn't just any handbag. A quick search of the brand name embossed in gold on the leather confirmed it was a luxury item that cost well over $3,000. It was a striking accessory, a rich, emerald green that stood out against her neutral-toned outfit. She was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was a look of smug satisfaction, a self-congratulatory smirk aimed at her reflection. My heart began to beat a little faster. It was an expensive bag, but maybe she'd saved up for it. Maybe a friend had gifted it to her. I was about to click away, to dismiss it as another instance of Chloe's infuriatingly charmed life, when I read the caption. The words felt like a physical blow. Obsessed with my new baby. Sparkles a huge thank you to the best, most generous mom in the world for the surprise gift. You always know how to spoil me. New bag luxury life spoiled best mom ever. I read it once, then twice. My vision narrowed until the only thing I could see were those cheerful, treacherous words. The most generous mom in the world. Surprise gift. I scrolled down through the comments, a torrent of OMG gorgeous, and your mom is amazing, from her legion of followers. And then I saw it. Nestled among the fawning remarks was a familiar profile picture, the same soft focus photo of my mother from a decade ago. Brenda had not only seen the post, she had interacted with it. She had left a comment. "You deserve it, my sweet girl." Read, and right next to her comment was the little heart icon, indicating that she had liked the post. The air in my apartment suddenly felt thick and suffocating. The timeline was brutally, undeniably clear. On Tuesday evening, my mother called me, claiming to be in mortal danger from a broken furnace, and begged for $5,000. On Tuesday night, I, her responsible daughter, sacrificed my vacation fund and sent her $2,500. On Wednesday, my sister, Chloe, posted a photo of a brand new $3,000 handbag, explicitly thanking our generous mother for the gift. And my mother, the supposedly destitute woman shivering in her home, had publicly endorsed the post. The sequence of events played out in my mind like a data flow diagram, each point connecting to the next with cold, hard logic. The emergency was a lie. The panic in her voice was a performance. My sacrifice was not for her safety, it was for my sister's vanity. The money I had earned through hundreds of hours of focused, difficult work, the money I had carefully set aside for a brief respite from that work, had been laundered through my mother's bank account and transformed into a luxury accessory for my sister to flaunt on the internet. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a lie, it was a conspiracy. A long-term, calculated deception with me as the sole financier. How many of the previous emergencies had been real? The leaky plumbing, the dental crown, the unexpected property tax hike. How many of my sister's expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and designer clothes had I unknowingly funded? The feeling in my chest was a complex cocktail of emotions. There was a deep, gut-wrenching betrayal that felt like a physical wound. There was the sting of humiliation, the knowledge that they had been laughing at me, the dutiful fool, for years. But underneath it all, a new feeling was beginning to crystallize. It was cold, sharp, and intensely clarifying. It was rage. A pure, unadulterated anger that burned away the years of guilt and obligation like a forest fire. I stood up from my couch and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights without really seeing them. The illusion of my family dynamic had been shattered. I wasn't the pillar holding them up, I was the mine they were stripping for resources. They hadn't just taken my money. They had taken my love, my trust, and my compassion, and they had monetized it. The second half of the furnace payment was due in less than 2 weeks. My mother would be expecting it. A plan, vague and unformed, began to stir in the back of my mind. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had used my analytical mind to earn money for them, but they had never considered that I might one day turn that same analytical mind against them. The game had changed. They just didn't know it yet. The anger didn't fade overnight. It solidified, hardening from a molten rage into something colder and more durable: resolve. For 2 days, I went through the motions of my life, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the discovery, analyzing every past conversation with my mother for hidden signs I had missed. The world looked different now, as if a filter had been removed, revealing the stark, unflattering truth that had been there all along. The problem was, I was adrift in this new reality. The betrayal was so profound that I began to question my own judgment. Had I been a fool? Was I overreacting? I needed an anchor. I needed someone who existed outside the toxic ecosystem of my mother and sister, someone whose perspective I could trust. I needed my Aunt Patty. Patricia, my mother's older sister, was everything Brenda was not. She was a high school history teacher, a woman who valued facts, integrity, and accountability. Where my mother was soft, manipulative, and emotionally driven, Patty was direct, practical, and had a built-in no-nonsense detector that had never failed her. Our relationship was warm but not overly close. We exchanged birthday cards and saw each other at the rare family gathering. But I had always felt a sense of safety in her presence, the kind you feel around someone who will tell you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. I called her on Saturday morning, my heart pounding as if I were about to present a high-stakes project report. "Ilara, what a nice surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Her voice boomed over the phone, cheerful and robust. "Hi, Aunt Patty, I needed to talk to you about something, about Mom and Chloe." The immediate shift in her tone told me everything I needed to know. The cheerfulness vanished, replaced by a weary sigh. Ah, what have they done now? The validation in those 5 words was so powerful it almost brought me to tears. I wasn't crazy. This was a pattern, a known quantity. Taking a deep breath, I laid it all out. I told her about the endless stream of emergencies, the constant financial drain. I told her about the latest call, the $5,000 furnace. I described sending the first payment, and then, my voice shaking with residual anger, I told her about Chloe's social media post, the luxury handbag, and my mother's congratulatory comment. She listened without interruption, a skill she had no doubt honed over decades of dealing with teenagers. When I finished, the line was silent for a long moment. I could hear the faint sound of a clock ticking in her kitchen. "Ilara," she finally said, her voice heavy with a sorrow that seemed ancient. "I am so sorry. I'm sorry you've been carrying this load by yourself, and I'm sorry that I never stepped in." "You didn't know the extent of it," I said quickly. "Oh, honey, I knew," she replied, and the certainty in her voice sent a chill down my spine. "I didn't know the specifics, but I know my sister. This isn't new behavior. This is who she is." She then told me a story from our childhood, one I had never heard before. "Do you remember when you were about 10 and you won that regional science fair? You won a $100 savings bond. You were so proud of it. You were going to save it for college." I did remember. It was one of my proudest childhood moments. I remembered holding the crisp certificate, feeling like a genius. "Yes," I said, "I lost it. Mom helped me look everywhere, but we never found it." Aunt Patty made a bitter, scoffing sound. "You didn't lose it, Ilara. Your mother cashed it." Chloe had been begging for this ridiculously expensive doll, the kind that came with a whole wardrobe and a little plastic horse. Brenda told her no, that it was too much money. A week after your science fair, Chloe had that doll. When I asked Brenda where she got the money, she told me she'd been frugal. Later, I found the cashed bond receipt in her desk drawer while looking for a stamp. The story landed like a stone in my stomach. A $100 savings bond was nothing compared to the thousands I had sent over the years, but the principle was identical. The pattern was the same: take from the responsible one to give to the favored one. My entire life, I had been cast in the role of the provider, while Chloe was the designated recipient. It wasn't a recent development, it was the foundational text of our family. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, the hurt of this older, smaller betrayal fresh and sharp. "What would it have changed?" she asked gently. "You were a child. It would have broken your heart and turned you against your mother. I confronted Brenda, of course. We had a terrible fight. She accused me of being jealous, of trying to poison her children against her. She didn't speak to me for a year. I learned then that you can't force someone to see the truth if they are determined to live in a fantasy. And Brenda's fantasy is that Chloe is a precious prodigy, and you are the endlessly regenerating resource to fund that fantasy." She continued, her voice hardening with the conviction of a teacher delivering an important lesson. "Listen to me, Ilara. Your mother sees your success not as your own achievement, but as a utility for her convenience. Your money, your stability, your reliability, in her mind, those things belong to the family, and she and Chloe are the board of directors. You have to understand this is not about need. Brenda's pension and survivor benefits are more than enough for her to live comfortably. This is about greed and a breathtaking level of entitlement. They've been playing you, and they will continue to play you for as long as you let them." Her words were harsh, but they were also liberating. She was handing me the key to my own prison cell. The last vestiges of guilt and self-doubt evaporated, replaced by a steely certainty. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was armed with the truth. "The second payment for the furnace is due in about 10 days, I said, my voice now steady and clear. "She's going to call, expecting another $2,500. "And what are you going to do?" Aunt Patty asked, her tone shifting from informative to supportive. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I'm not sending it, and I'm not just going to ignore the call. This has to end, and it has to end in a way that they can't deny or twist. I need proof, incontrovertible proof." "Well," Aunt Patty said, a hint of admiration in her voice, "if anyone can find proof in a pile of chaos, it's you. You're a data analyst, for heaven's sake. Treat this like one of your projects. Find the patterns, build your case." The suggestion clicked into place in my mind, perfectly logical and immensely satisfying. She was right. They had underestimated me. They saw me as a daughter, a sister, a source of cash. They had forgotten what I actually did for a living. I spent 8 hours a day finding the signal in the noise, uncovering hidden reality. On chips in vast, messy data sets. My mother and sister had been generating data for years. It was time to run the analysis. "Thank you, Aunt Patty," I said, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "The truth is all I have to give, honey," she replied. "You just be careful. When you corner a creature like your mother, she gets vicious." I promised I would be careful. As I hung up the phone, I felt a profound shift within me. The era of Alara, the dutiful daughter, was over. The era of Alara, the forensic accountant of her own life, had just begun. My conversation with Aunt Patty was the catalyst. It transformed my emotional turmoil into a clear, defined mission: to gather undeniable evidence of the financial deception that had defined my life for years. I was no longer just a victim. I was the lead investigator in the case of my own exploitation. My apartment, once a sanctuary of peace, became my command center. My work as a data analyst, which I had long seen as just a job, now felt like my superpower. The first step was data collection. I spent the entire weekend hunched over my laptop, fueled by black coffee and a righteous fury. I opened 2 main windows on my screen. On one side, my online banking portal. On the other, Chloe's public social media feed. I started by creating a new spreadsheet, my fingers flying across the keyboard, creating columns with a familiar, comforting efficiency. Date of transfer, amount, reason given by Brenda, Chloe's social media activity, post-transfer, item activity, estimated cost. Methodically, I scrolled back through years of my financial history. Every wire transfer to Brenda was a data point. I logged each one: $1,500 for emergency root canal in April, $800 for car transmission trouble the previous November, $2,000 for a leaky roof 2 summers ago. The list went on, a bleak chronicle of manufactured crises. The reasons she had given me, once so convincing in their urgency, now looked laughably transparent. Then came the painstaking work of cross-referencing. I scrolled back through years of Chloe's digital life, a timeline of unearned luxury. It was nauseating work. Every photo of a new dress, a fancy dinner, a weekend trip to a winery, a new piece of tech, it all felt like a personal insult. But with my spreadsheet open, it was more than an insult. It was evidence. The patterns began to emerge with shocking clarity. The day after I sent $1,500 for the root canal, Chloe posted a photo series from a much-needed spa day with my besties. She was in a fluffy white robe, a glass of champagne in her hand. A quick search of the spa's name revealed their deluxe rejuvenation package cost a cool $500 per person. 3 days after I sent $800 for the car transmission, Chloe posted a glowing review of a new pair of noise-canceling headphones, thanking her anonymous benefactor winking face. The headphones retailed for $400. And what happened to the other $400? A week later, she posted about attending a concert. Tickets for that artist were notoriously expensive, easily running a few $100s. The correlation was undeniable, almost 1-to-1. The $2,000 I sent for the leaky roof corresponded perfectly with a spontaneous weekend trip to a boutique hotel in wine country that Chloe took with a friend, documented in a 20-photo carousel. The cost of the hotel rooms, wine tastings, and expensive meals would have easily consumed the full $2,000. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. I was the ghostwriter of her glamorous life. My hard-earned money, sent under the pretense of keeping our mother's head above water, was being funneled directly to Chloe to create a life of leisure and luxury. The most damning part was my mother's active participation in the digital charade. She was a frequent commenter on Chloe's posts. "So proud of my ambitious girl," she commented on a photo of Chloe lounging by a pool. "You have such wonderful taste, sweetie," she wrote under a picture of a new designer jacket. Each comment was a small twist of the knife, a public endorsement of their shared fraud. As a data analyst, I knew correlation didn't equal causation. I needed something more direct. I kept digging, scrolling back further and further, my eyes straining from the screen's glare. And then I found it, the smoking gun. It was from about 18 months prior. I had sent my mom $1,200. The reason she gave me was particularly heart-wrenching. She needed to pay for a series of expensive allergy tests that weren't covered by her insurance. I remembered feeling so sorry for her, imagining her suffering and discomfort. 2 days later, Chloe posted a photo of a new laptop. It was a sleek, high-end model favored by graphic designers and artists. Her caption read, "Finally upgraded my workspace. I can be so much more creative now. A special shout out to my mom for believing in my art and helping me get the tools I need to succeed. She told me it was part of an early inheritance, so I could build my future." An early inheritance. The phrase struck me like lightning. My money, given for a fabricated medical need, was being rebranded as an inheritance for my sister. It was a strategic, psychological masterpiece of manipulation. It not only provided Chloe with the funds, but also reinforced her status as the treasured heir, while I was relegated to the role of the off-screen, unacknowledged donor. It was a lie of breathtaking audacity. I took a screenshot of the post. Then I took screenshots of dozens of other posts, each one a nail in the coffin of their deception. I linked each screenshot in my spreadsheet, creating a digital dossier of their fraud. By Sunday evening, I had a comprehensive, evidence-based report that detailed nearly $30,000 in transfers over 5 years, all of which corresponded directly with Chloe's non-essential, luxury spending. Looking at the completed spreadsheet, I didn't feel the same hot rage as before. Instead, I felt a cold, clear certainty. The emotional element was gone, replaced by the objective reality of the data. The numbers didn't lie. The timestamps didn't lie. My mother and sister had been running a long-term, low-level criminal enterprise with me as their only victim. The question now was what to do with this information. I could just cut them off, block their numbers, and disappear. But that felt unsatisfying. It would allow them to paint me as the villain, the cold, ungrateful daughter who abandoned her poor mother. They would control the narrative, just as they always had. No, this required something more direct. A confrontation, but a confrontation backed by irrefutable proof. I needed one more piece of evidence, one final trap that would expose their process in real time, leaving them with absolutely no room for denial. The plan began to form in my mind, a logical sequence of actions designed to produce a specific, predictable outcome. My mother was expecting the second furnace payment in a week. I would be ready. With my spreadsheet of historical evidence complete, I transitioned from analyst to strategist. Simply presenting past deeds wasn't enough. My mother was a master of deflection, a black belt in gaslighting. She could claim Chloe saved her own money, that the timings were coincidental, that I was misinterpreting things and being cruel. I needed to catch them in the act. I needed to set a trap that would expose not just the lie, but the mechanics of the lie in real time. I called Aunt Patty and walked her through my plan. I needed a co-conspirator, a witness who could verify the steps I was taking. "This is brilliant, Alara," she said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "It's clinical. It's exactly what you need to do." The plan was simple. I would wait for my mother's inevitable follow-up call about the second half of the furnace money. When she called, instead of refusing, I would lean into the lie with unnerving enthusiasm. I would agree to pay the final $2,500, but with one crucial condition. To avoid any banking delays, I would insist on paying the furnace company directly. This was the crux of the trap. There was, of course, no furnace company. There was no broken furnace. I would be asking her to produce a bill from a company that did not exist for a service that was never rendered. Her response would be the final piece of my puzzle. The call came on Wednesday, almost exactly a week after the first one. I let it ring twice before answering, schooling my features into a neutral expression and my voice into a tone of helpful concern. "Hi, Mom." "Alara, hi, sweetie," she began, her voice already laced with that familiar, manufactured anxiety. "I was just calling to check in about the, furnace situation. The technician is scheduled to come install the new one on Friday, but he needs the final payment before he'll order the unit." The detail was a nice touch. It added a layer of authenticity to the lie. "Oh, of course," I said, my voice bright and accommodating. "I haven't forgotten. I have the money ready to go." A palpable wave of relief came through the phone. "Oh, thank goodness. You're such a lifesaver, Alara. You can just wire it to my account like last time, and I'll pay him when he gets here." "Actually, I have a better idea," I said cheerfully. "To make sure it gets there on time and to save you the trouble of handling all that cash, why don't I just pay the company directly with my credit card? It's faster, and I get travel points." I added the last part to make my motive seem self-serving and innocuous. "Just text me the name of the company and their phone number, and I'll call and settle the bill right now. What's the name on the invoice?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It stretched for a full 10 seconds. I could picture the frantic machinations in her mind, the cogs grinding as she tried to process this unexpected deviation from the script. "Oh," she finally stammered, her voice losing its frail quality and gaining a sharp, defensive edge. "Well, I don't have the paperwork right in front of me. It's in the kitchen somewhere." "No problem, I can wait," I said calmly, sipping the water I had poured for myself in preparation. I clicked my pen, an audible, businesslike sound. "Just go grab it. I have my card out." It's a small, local company," she floundered. "I'm not even sure they take credit cards. The technician, a Mr. Henderson, he prefers a bank draft." "That's fine too," I countered, remaining relentlessly helpful. "Just give me the company name and account details, and I can have my bank wire the payment directly to their business account. It will be even quicker." She was cornered, and I could hear the rising panic in her voice. "Alara, why are you making this so complicated? It's much simpler if you just send the money to me. I've handled these things my whole life. Don't you trust me?" There it was. The classic defensive maneuver. Flip the script and make my perfectly reasonable request sound like an accusation. Years ago, this would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. Now, it just confirmed I was on the right track. "Of course, I trust you, Mom," I lied smoothly. "I'm just trying to be efficient, it's what I do. But if it's too much trouble to find the invoice, that's okay. I'll just hold on to the money until you find it. Let me know when you have their details." I had given her an out, but it was an out that left the money firmly in my bank account. The choice was hers. Either produce a fictional invoice or give up the $2,500. I'll have to call you back," she said, her voice tight with unconcealed fury. "I have to find the paperwork. It's in a pile somewhere." She hung up without saying goodbye. Immediately, I texted Aunt Patty. Phase 1 complete. She's flustered. Predict she'll call back with a story about how the company only takes cash. Aunt Patty's reply came a minute later. "Excellent. The cornered animal is showing its teeth. Stand by for phase 2. Phase 2 would be tracking the fallout. My hypothesis was simple. My mother, unable to procure the money from me directly, would become desperate. She would likely complain to Chloe, and Chloe, deprived of her expected windfall, would reveal her frustration. The trap wasn't just about exposing my mother's lie, it was about observing the chain reaction. I gave it 24 hours. I checked Chloe's social media obsessively. Nothing. Her feed remained quiet. This was unusual in itself. She normally posted a story or a photo every day. The silence was telling. The proof I was waiting for came on Friday afternoon, the day the furnace was supposed to be installed. It wasn't a public post. It was a message from Aunt Patty. She had forwarded me a screenshot from a private, family-only group chat that I had been excluded from years ago. The screenshot showed a new message from Chloe, sent just an hour earlier. Chloe's message read, "Worst week ever. Mom's surprise for my birthday trip fell through. Now I have to cancel my flight to Miami. Sue beyond disappointed. Angry face." Aunt Patty had added a single line of text beneath the screenshot. "Looks like someone's furnace money didn't come through." I stared at the screenshot, a grim smile spreading across my face. Miami, so that's what the furnace was for. It wasn't a handbag this time, it was a birthday vacation. My mother hadn't been trying to fix her house, she was trying to send her favorite daughter to a beach resort. And by refusing to blindly hand over the cash, I had single-handedly grounded the flight. This was the final piece of evidence. It was contemporary, it was irrefutable, and it directly linked my emergency request to Chloe's lifestyle. I had the historical data. I had the live experiment. I had the verified outcome. My case was complete. Now, all that was left was the presentation. I picked up my phone and composed a group text to my mother, my sister, and my aunt. "Hi everyone. I'd like to have a family dinner on Sunday evening at my apartment. I'm making lasagna. Please let me know if you can make it. It's important that we all talk." My mother replied almost instantly, "Of course, sweetie, that sounds lovely." Chloe's reply came an hour later, "K." Aunt Patty's was the last one, wouldn't miss it for the world. The stage was set. The defendants and the witness had confirmed their attendance. The prosecutor had her evidence in a neat manila folder on her coffee table. Sunday dinner was no longer about lasagna. It was about judgment. Sunday arrived with a heavy, expectant atmosphere. I spent the afternoon on autopilot, preparing the lasagna, tossing a salad, and setting the table. Every action was deliberate and calm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt like a courtroom. The dining table was the witness stand. The manila folder filled with my printed-out evidence, which I had placed on the sideboard, felt as heavy as a volume of legal code. Aunt Patty arrived first, right on time. She gave me a long, supportive hug and surveyed the scene. "You're calm," she observed, her teacher's eyes assessing me. "I'm a data analyst," I replied, a small, grim smile on my lips. "I've reviewed the data, and I'm confident in my conclusions. This is just the final presentation." She squeezed my arm. "I'm proud of you, Alara. This takes a courage you maybe didn't even know you had." My mother and Chloe arrived 15 minutes later. Their entrance shifted the energy in the room immediately, sucking the warmth out of the air. My mother, Brenda, was all smiles and compliments, carrying a cheap bottle of wine as a peace offering. "Oh, Alara, everything looks so wonderful. You've always had such a lovely touch." It was a performance, an attempt to smooth over the tension from our phone call. She was pretending nothing was wrong. Chloe was another story. She slouched in behind my mother, radiating sullen energy. She didn't make eye contact, her face set in a pout. She was clearly still stewing over her canceled Miami trip. She flopped onto my sofa, pulled out her phone, and began scrolling, a silent, contemptuous protest against being forced to attend. We made it through the pre-dinner small talk, a minefield of platitudes and avoided topics. I served the lasagna, and we ate for a few minutes in a silence thick with unspoken words. Brenda tried to fill the void, chattering about a neighbor's garden, but her words fell flat. Finally, I put down my fork, dabbed my mouth with a napkin, and looked directly at her. "Mom," I began, my voice even and steady. "How's the furnace?" Brenda froze, a forkful of lasagna halfway to her mouth. Chloe looked up from her phone for the first time, her eyes narrowing. The furnace," my mother stammered. "Oh, it's fine, all fixed." "Really? That's wonderful news," I said, my tone dangerously pleasant. "Because the technician, Mr. Henderson, was supposed to install it on Friday, but he couldn't because he was waiting on the final payment. The payment I was supposed to make directly to his company. You never did send me their details. How did you manage to pay him?" My mother's face paled. She shot a panicked look at Chloe, who was now sitting bolt upright. I found some money I had tucked away for a rainy day," she said, the lie thin and unconvincing. "I didn't want to bother you again." "A rainy day fund? That's impressive," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Especially since you told me your pension barely covers groceries. It must have been quite a fund to cover a $2,500 repair bill." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air before I delivered the next blow. Or was the fund for something else? Like, for example, a birthday trip to Miami for Chloe. Chloe gasped, her face flushing a deep, mottled red. "How did you know about that?" she snapped, her voice shrill. "You mean the trip you had to cancel because, and I quote, 'Mom's surprise fell through'?" I asked sweetly, my eyes locked on hers. I reached over to the sideboard and picked up the manila folder. I opened it and slid the first piece of evidence across the table, the screenshot of Chloe's text from the family group chat. My mother stared at it, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. That's out of context. Patricia, you're spying on us?" she accused, deflecting wildly. "I'm not the one on trial here, Brenda," Aunt Patty said calmly, taking a sip of water. "This isn't a trial," I said, my voice hardening. "It's an audit." One by one, I laid the exhibits on the table. I started with the most recent, the social media post of the $3,000 handbag, with the caption thanking my generous mom. I placed my bank statement next to it, showing the $2,500 transfer I had made the day before. "This handbag," I said, tapping the photo, "was purchased with the first half of my furnace money, wasn't it?" Chloe glared at me defiant. "I can have nice things. You're just jealous of me, you always have been." "I'm not jealous of your things, Chloe," I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "Because they're not your things, they're my things, you're just the person who gets to wear them." Then came the flood. I laid out the spreadsheet, the years of data. The root canal money that became a spa day. The car transmission money that became headphones and concert tickets. The leaky roof money that paid for a wine tasting weekend. With every new exhibit, I narrated the facts in a calm, detached voice, like I was presenting findings to a board of directors. My mother crumpled. Her face, which had been a mask of indignant denial, began to break apart. Tears welled in her eyes, real tears this time, not the crocodile tears of her performances. These were the tears of someone who had been caught. "Ilara, you don't understand," she pleaded. "I just wanted her to be happy. Life has been so hard for her." "Hard for her?" I shot back, my voice finally cracking with the years of suppressed rage. "She lives at home rent-free. She has no job, no responsibilities. Her biggest hardship is deciding which filter to use on her brunch photos. Do you have any idea what my life is like? I work 60 hours a week. I haven't taken a real vacation in 3 years because every time I save up, you call with another emergency. You haven't been making her happy, you've been crippling her. And you've been using me to do it. You used my sense of duty and my love for you as a weapon against me." I turned my attention to Chloe, who was staring at the pile of evidence on the table as if it were a venomous snake. "And you," I said. "You went along with it, every single time. You knew where the money was coming from. You knew Mom was lying to me. You cashed the checks and you posed for the photos, and you didn't have the decency to even feel guilty about it." I looked back at my mother, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "The early inheritance for the laptop was a particularly cruel touch," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. making me pay for my own disinheritance. That one was inspired. The room was silent except for my mother's choked sobs. Chloe was pale, her usual arrogance completely gone, replaced by a look of genuine shock. It was clear she had never seen her actions laid out like this, never been forced to confront the cold, transactional nature of her relationship with me. "The financial support is over," I said, the words clear and final. "Effective immediately. There will be no more money. Not for furnaces, not for rent, not for anything. The Bank of Alara is closed." My mother looked up, her eyes wide with panic. "But what will we do?" "I don't know," I said, and for the first time, I felt the truth of the words not as a burden, but as a liberation. That is no longer my problem to solve. The silence that followed my declaration was the most profound silence I had ever experienced. It was the sound of a system crashing, of a lifelong dynamic shattering into a million pieces. My mother stared at me, her face a mess of disbelief and despair. Chloe just looked down at her hands, for once completely speechless. Aunt Patty sat quietly, a pillar of silent support. The end of the dinner was swift and awkward. There were no more arguments, no more denials. The data was irrefutable. My mother and sister gathered their things like scolded children, unable to meet my eyes. My mother paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "I love you, Alara," she whispered, a last, desperate attempt to pull the guilt lever. "I know," I said, and I did. I believe she loved me in her own flawed, transactional way. But I had finally realized that love shouldn't come with an itemized invoice. "But this has to stop. Goodbye, Mom." They left, and the moment the door clicked shut, I felt a wave of exhaustion so immense I had to sit down. Aunt Patty came and sat beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness. The anger that had fueled me for weeks was gone, and in its place was just quiet. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "you start living your life for yourself." The immediate aftermath was a volley of emotional artillery. For the first week, my mother sent a barrage of texts, alternating between angry accusations, "How could you be so cruel?" and pleading apologies, "I know I made a mistake, but I'm your mother." Chloe, after a few days of silence, sent a single, petulant message. "I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything." I read them, acknowledged the feelings behind them, and then I did something I had never done before. I muted their conversations. I didn't block them. That felt too final, too dramatic. Muting them was a quiet, personal act of boundary setting. I was no longer available for immediate emotional summons. Weeks turned into a month. The silence from their end grew. According to Aunt Patty, reality was hitting them hard. My mother had to dip into her own actual savings to cover her expenses. Chloe, deprived of her steady stream of unearned income, had been forced to get a part-time job in retail. The influencer was now folding sweaters and dealing with rude customers. The injustice seemed to offend her deeply. For my part, I was discovering what it meant to have my own money. It was a revelation. My bank account, for the first time, was growing. The automatic debit of family emergency was gone, and the surplus was staggering. It felt like getting a massive raise. The first thing I did was book the trip to Monterey. I didn't hesitate. I paid for the flight and a beautiful hotel overlooking the ocean in a single transaction. A few weeks later, I was there, standing on a cliff with the wind in my hair, watching sea otters play in the kelp beds below. The air was crisp and clean, and with every breath, I felt like I was clearing out the last remnants of the toxic fog I had lived in for so long. This was what my work was for. This was the reward. It belonged to me. When I returned, I felt like a different person. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been my companion for years was gone. My focus at work improved. My mind felt clearer. I was no longer supporting 3 people on one salary. I was just supporting myself, and I found I was more than capable. I started investing, both in the market and in myself. I signed up for a pottery class, something I had always wanted to do. My first few creations were lopsided and clumsy, but the feeling of creating something with my own hands, for my own pleasure, was deeply satisfying. About 6 months after the intervention, I got a call from Aunt Patty. "I have some news," she said. "Chloe moved out." I was stunned. "She did? Where did she go?" "She and a friend got a small apartment across town. She's working full-time at the store now. Apparently, she's up for a promotion to assistant manager." Aunt Patty paused. "And Brenda told me that Chloe is insisting on paying her for room and board for the last few months she was at home. She's paying it back in installments." It was a piece of information I didn't know what to do with. It wasn't an apology, but it was a form of accountability. Perhaps being severed from my bank account had been the best thing that could have ever happened to my sister. By refusing to enable her, I had accidentally forced her to grow up. My relationship with my mother and sister remains distant. We exchange polite, infrequent texts on birthdays and holidays. The old dynamic is broken, and we haven't figured out how to build a new one yet. Maybe we never will, but I've made peace with that. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to let them stand on their own 2 feet, and the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to refuse to be their crutch.